She was just a waitress until a Mafia boss pulled her close and asked, "Marry me?" The fluorescent lights of Rosie's diner hummed with a low, irritating buzz that Lena Moretti felt in her teeth. It was 2 in the morning, and the smell of stale coffee and grease had settled into her pores, a scent she could never quite scrub away no matter how hard she tried. Lena shifted her weight from one aching foot to the other, adjusting the apron that dug into her waist. She was 23 years old, but tonight she felt 50. She wiped down the counter, her movements mechanical. Her mind was not on the sticky linoleum or the cracked vinyl of the booths, but on the biology textbook sitting in her locker in the back room. It cost $150, a sum that felt insurmountable. Every shift was a calculation. If she walked home instead of taking the bus, she saved $2. If she skipped lunch, she saved $5. It was a slow, grinding existence, scraping together rent while nursing a dream of nursing school that seemed to drift further away with every double shift. The bell above the door chimed, signaling a late arrival. Lena did not look up immediately. She focused on a stubborn coffee stain on the counter, scrubbing until her knuckles turned white. "Hey, sweetness, pour me a fresh one." The voice was slurred, heavy with unearned familiarity. Lena suppressed a sigh and plastered on her customer service smile, the one that never reached her eyes. She turned to see a man she recognized only as a bad tipper and a worse drunk. He was sliding onto a stool, his face flushed and sweaty, his eyes roaming over her uniform with a possessiveness that made her skin crawl. "We are closing in 20 minutes, Lena said, her voice steady but cool. "Coffee is off. I can get you a soda." The man chuckled, a wet, unpleasant sound. "Come on, Rosie ain't here. You can brew a fresh pot for me." "You know I like it hot." He reached across the counter, his fingers thick and clumsy, aiming for her hand. Lena pulled back sharply, the rag in her hand acting as a flimsy shield. "Don't touch me," she said. The politeness was gone. In this neighborhood, politeness got you hurt. Firmness was the only language men like this understood. The man's face darkened, his jovial demeanor vanished, replaced by a sudden, volatile aggression. He slammed his hand onto the countertop, making the silverware rattle. "Don't be a bitch," he spat. "I asked for coffee. You are a waitress. Wait on me." Lena looked toward the end of the counter where the night manager, Stan, was counting the till. Stan heard the slam. He looked up, saw the situation, and then, with cowardly precision, looked back down at the receipts. Lena felt a cold knot of anger tighten in her stomach. She was on her own. Again. She took a step back. "You need to leave. Now." The drunk stood up, swaying slightly. He was big, heavy-set, and fueled by liquid courage. He reached over the counter again, this time grabbing her wrist before she could retreat. His grip was bruising, his fingernails digging into her pulse point. "I will leave when I am good and ready," he hissed, leaning in close enough that she could smell the sour whiskey on his breath. "And I am not ready." Panic flared in Lena's chest, but she refused to scream. She tried to twist her arm free, but his grip was like iron. "Let go of her." The voice came from the corner booth. The one in the shadows that Lena had forgotten was occupied. It was a low voice, calm and deep, carrying a weight that cut through the humid air of the diner like a blade. The drunk froze. Lena stopped struggling, her eyes darting to the source of the sound. A man stood up from the shadows. He was tall, well over 6 feet, wearing a tailored black coat that cost more than everything Lena owned combined. He moved with a strange, fluid grace, making no sound as he approached the counter. His face was sharp, composed of hard angles and a jawline that looked carved from granite, but it was his eyes that held Lena captive. They were dark, intelligent, and utterly terrifying. The drunk laughed nervously, though he did not let go of Lena's wrist. "This ain't your business, pal. Sit down." The man in the black coat did not sit down. He stopped 2 feet away from the drunk. He did not raise his hands. He did not shout. He simply looked at the hand gripping Lena's wrist, then up at the drunk's face. "I will not ask twice," the stranger said. The drunk sneered, puffing out his chest. "Oh yeah? Or what? "You gonna call the cops?" The stranger moved. It happened so fast, Lena barely registered it. One moment the drunk was standing, the next, his arm was twisted at an unnatural angle, and he was slammed face first onto the counter. A yelp of pain escaped him, quickly silenced as the stranger leaned in, whispering something into the drunk's ear. Lena could not hear the words, but she saw the color drain from the drunk's face. He went pale, his eyes bulging with terror. The stranger released him, stepping back and smoothing the front of his coat as if he had merely brushed off a speck of dust. The drunk stumbled back, cradling his arm. He looked at the stranger, then at Lena, his eyes wide with shock. He did not say another word. He turned and scrambled out of the diner, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste to escape. Silence descended on the room. Stan, the manager, was still staring at his receipts, pretending he had gone deaf. Lena stood behind the counter, her heart hammering against her ribs. She rubbed her wrist where the red marks of fingers were already beginning to bruise. She looked at the man. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. He was beautiful in a severe, dangerous way, the kind of man who commanded a room simply by existing in it. "Thank you," Lena said, her voice trembling slightly. He did not smile. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek leather wallet. He extracted 5 $100 bills and placed them on the counter. "For the trouble," he said. Lena stared at the money. $500. That was rent. That was the textbook. That was groceries for a month. But pride, prickly and stubborn, flared in her chest. "I don't want your money," she said. "I didn't ask for help." The man's lips quivered, barely moving. "No, you didn't. That is why you need it." He took a pen from the cup on the counter, grabbed a napkin, and wrote something in swift, sharp strokes. He placed the napkin on top of the bills. "Lena Moretti," he said. She stiffened. "How do you know my name?" He gestured vaguely to her name tag, though she knew, with a sinking feeling, that he hadn't looked at it. "You don't belong here, Lena," he said softly. "This life fits you like a coat that is 2 sizes too small." He turned and walked toward the door, the heavy fabric of his coat swaying. Before he pushed it open, he paused without looking back. "Call me." Then he was gone, swallowed by the night. Lena stared at the door for a long time. Slowly, she reached out and took the napkin. In elegant, masculine handwriting, he had written a phone number and a short message. "You don't belong here." She looked at the money, then she looked at the napkin. With a sudden burst of frustration, she crumpled the napkin into a ball and tossed it into the trash bin behind the counter. She snatched up the money, intending to run after him and give it back, but when she looked out the window, the street was empty. She pocketed the cash with a mixture of guilt and relief, finished her shift, and clocked out. The walk to her apartment was usually a 20-minute routine of keeping her head down and walking fast. Tonight, however, the air felt heavier. The city was never truly quiet, but the shadows seemed to stretch longer, reaching for her ankles. Lena clutched her purse tight against her side. She turned down 4th Street, a narrow corridor of brick buildings and flickering streetlights. The sound of footsteps echoed behind her. She stopped. The footsteps stopped. She started walking again, faster this time. The footsteps resumed, matching her pace. Her heart leaped into her throat. She did not look back. She knew the rules of the street. Never show fear. Never stop. Get to the light. She fumbled in her pocket for her keys, her fingers shaking. She was 2 blocks away. Just 2 blocks. The footsteps quickened, heavy boots striking pavement. Lena broke into a run. She turned the corner onto her block, gasping for air. She could hear the person behind her running now, closing the distance. She reached the stoop of her building, jamming the key into the reluctant lock of the main door. It stuck. "Come on," she whispered, panic rising to a scream in her throat. "Come on!" A hand grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. Lena opened her mouth to scream, raising her bag to strike, but a figure stepped out from the darkness of the alcove next to her door. "Let her go!" It was the same voice from the diner. Calm, deadly. The pursuer, a man in a hooded sweatshirt, froze. He looked at Lena, then at the man emerging from the shadows. It was him. The man in the black coat, Damiano Vascari. She didn't know his name yet, but his presence was unmistakable. The stalker didn't need to be told twice. He saw the glint of something metallic in the stranger's hand, or maybe it was just the way the light hit his watch, and bolted, disappearing down the alleyway. Lena sagged against the doorframe, her knees turning to water. She looked up at her savior. He was standing close, but not touching her. He was simply there. A wall between her and the world. "You followed me," she accused, though the fight had gone out of her voice. "I ensured you arrived," he corrected. "Why?" she asked, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Who are you?" "Damiano Vescari," he said. The name meant nothing to her, yet it sounded like it should. He looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her face, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered. "Good. Open the door." "Lena." She hesitated, then turned and jiggled the key. The lock finally clicked. She pushed the door open and turned back to him. He hadn't moved. He stood on the bottom step, the streetlight illuminating the sharp planes of his face. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment, the silence between them thick and electric. It wasn't the predatory tension of the drunk at the diner. It was something else. Curiosity. Recognition, because the world is a dangerous place for a rabbit among wolves. He said, "I am not a rabbit," she snapped, a flash of her old spirit returning. He smiled then, a genuine, terrifyingly attractive smile. "No, you are not. That is what makes you interesting." He nodded toward the hallway. "Go upstairs, lock your door, do not open it for anyone." Lena wanted to ask more, but the command in his voice was absolute. She stepped inside and closed the door. She listened until she heard his footsteps walk away. Slow and deliberate. That night, she barely slept. She pushed a chair under the doorknob of her small studio apartment. Every creak of the floorboards made her jump. The $500 sat on her nightstand, mocking her. The next morning, the sun did little to dispel the fear clinging to her. She went to her second job at the library, then back to the diner for the lunch shift. She was exhausted, running on caffeine and adrenaline. When she returned home at 6 in the evening, she knew immediately that something was wrong. The door to her apartment was unlocked. Lena froze in the hallway. She knew she had locked it. She remembered the resistance of the deadbolt. She pushed the door open with her fingertips, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The apartment was a wreck. It hadn't been tossed in a search for valuables. Her television, an old boxy thing, was still there. The jar of change on the counter was untouched, but her clothes had been pulled from the drawers and thrown onto the floor. Her mattress was overturned, and on the small table where she kept her mail, a single piece of paper lay in the center. It was a printout from her personnel file at the diner. Her full name, her social security number, her address. It had been taken from her locker at work. A chill, colder than the winter wind, swept through her. This wasn't a robbery. This was a message. Lena backed out of the room, clutching her purse. She couldn't stay here. She turned to run, but the hallway was blocked. Damiano Vescari stood at the top of the stairs. He was wearing a different suit today, charcoal gray, impeccable. He looked at the open door of her apartment, then at her face. His expression was grim. "I told you to be careful," he said. Lena's voice broke. Someone was in there. "They have my information, my social life. Everything I know," Damiano said. She stared at him. "How do you know?" "Because I make it my business to know when things in my city are out of order," he said. Stepping past her to look into the apartment, he surveyed the chaos with a detached, professional eye. He didn't step inside. He didn't need to. "Pack a bag," he said, turning back to her. "What?" "Pack a bag. Lena, you cannot stay here." "I have nowhere else to go," she said, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. "I don't have a family. I don't have money for a hotel. You have me," he said simply. The absurdity of the statement made her laugh, a harsh, hysterical sound. "I don't know you. You are a stranger who leaves big tips and scares off creeps. I am not going anywhere with you." Damiano stepped closer. The air in the hallway seemed to compress. He didn't touch her, but his presence enveloped her. The men who did this, he said, gesturing to her room, "are not looking for a television. They are looking for leverage. They saw me intervene last night. They saw me walk you home. Now they think you matter to me." Lena felt the blood drain from her face. "So this is your fault?" "Yes," he admitted without hesitation. "It is. And that is why I am going to fix it. You will come to my penthouse. It is secure. No one gets in unless I allow it." "No," she said, backing away until her back hit the peeling wallpaper of the hallway. "I am not going to your penthouse. I am not your... whatever you think I am." Damiano's jaw tightened. He closed the distance between them. He reached out, his hand hovering near her arm before he gently, deliberately, took hold of her elbow. His grip was firm but not painful, a stark contrast to the drunk at the diner. He pulled her a step closer, forcing her to look up into his eyes. They were dark swirls of gold and brown, intense and unyielding. "Lena," he said, his voice dropping to a murmur that vibrated in her chest. "If you stay here, they will come back, tonight. And when they come back, they will not just throw your clothes on the floor." Tears pricked her eyes, hot and angry. She was trapped by poverty, trapped by violence, and now trapped by this dangerous, beautiful man. "I just want to go to school," she whispered, a broken confession. "I just want to live my life." "I know," he said. "And I can give you that." She shook her head. I can't just go with you. People will talk. I'm not that kind of girl." Damiano studied her face. He saw the fear, the pride, the exhaustion. He saw the woman who stood up to a man twice her size, the woman who worked double shifts to buy a biology textbook. He made a decision. He released her elbow and slid his hand down to her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. The contact was shocking, warm and intimate. He pulled her close, until her chest brushed the lapel of his suit. She could smell him, sandalwood, expensive tobacco, and rain. "Then marry me," he said. The world stopped. The sounds of the city outside faded into a dull roar. Lena stared at him, her lips parting in shock. "What?" she breathed. "Marry me," Damiano repeated, his voice steady, as if he were discussing a business merger rather than a lifelong commitment. "You're crazy," she whispered. "Perhaps," he said, "but listen to me. If you are just my guest, you are vulnerable. If you are my mistress, you are a target. But if you are my wife..." He raised her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "If you are my wife, you carry the Viscari name. You are under my protection by blood and law. No one will touch you. No one will look at you wrong. You will have immunity." He leaned in, his face inches from hers. She could feel the heat radiating from him. "Marry me, Lena? Then no one will ever touch you again." Lena looked into his eyes, searching for the joke, the trick. But there was only steel and a strange, burning intensity. He was offering her a cage. She knew that. But looking past him into her ransacked apartment, she realized her current life was a cage, too, one made of fear and poverty. Damiano Viscari was offering a cage made of gold and iron. She stood there in the dim hallway, her hand in his, the weight of his offer hanging in the air between them like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. Lena stared at him, the echo of his words, "Marry me," hanging in the cramped, musty hallway. She felt a hysterical bubble of laughter rise in her throat, and it escaped as a dry, short bark. "You are joking," she said. Damiano Viscari's dark eyes held hers. His expression was flat, devoid of any humor. "I do not joke about my name. Lena, this is a test. Then, you think I am some gold digger you found at a diner, and this is how you test me." She tried to pull her hand away, but his grip tightened just enough to hold her fast. His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a gesture that was not comforting, but proprietary. "This is not a test," he said, his voice low and patient, as if explaining a complex problem to a child. "And it is not about love. I am not offering you romance. I am offering you a shield." He gestured with his free hand toward her violated apartment. "The men who did this, they will not stop. They are from the Rocchetti family. They are my rivals. They saw me with you. They see you as a vulnerability, a lever. I do not even know you. "And that is why they will use you," he countered, stepping a fraction closer. "As you are now, you are a civilian. Collateral damage. No one cares if you disappear." His words were brutal, and she knew, instinctively, that they were true. "But if you are my fiancé," he continued, the pressure of his thumb increasing on her skin, "you are no longer a civilian. You are attached to the Viscari name. An offense against you becomes an offense against me, against my family. You would gain immunity, respect, protection." He called it protection. Lena saw the bars of the cage he was describing. It was a life she had only seen in movies. Dark and violent and inescapable. "I will not marry you," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Damiano studied her face, seeing the defiance warring with the terror. He had expected her to be pliable, broken by the night's events. He had miscalculated. This was, perhaps, what had drawn him to her in the first place. He nodded slowly. "Very well. Not marriage, but you are not staying here tonight." He released her hand and stepped back, breaking the intense, claustrophobic bubble of his presence. He motioned to her door. "Pack a bag, whatever you need for a few days. You will stay at my penthouse, as my guest." Lena hesitated, her mind racing. Go with a stranger, a man who admitted his rivals had just torn her life apart, or stay here, in an apartment that felt contaminated, waiting for the men to return? He saw her hesitation. "This is the alternative. Lena," he said, his voice soft but edged with steel. "You stay here, and I cannot guarantee I will arrive on time a second time." She looked at the floor, at the overturned mattress, the scattered clothes that represented her whole, meager life. He was right. He had caused this, but he was also the only one offering a way out. "I will go," she said, finally looking up at him. "Just to stay safe, temporarily, and I am not your fiancé. I am a guest. Nothing more." A faint smile touched his lips. "As you wish." She hurried inside, her skin crawling as she stepped over her belongings. She grabbed her backpack, shoving in a few changes of clothes, her toothbrush, and the heavy biology textbook. She paused, her eyes landing on the $500 bills he had left her at the diner, still sitting on her nightstand. She scooped them up and marched back into the hallway. She shoved the money against his chest. His suit was so finely tailored it felt like armor. "I am not taking your money." Damiano looked down at the crumpled bills in her hand, then back up at her face. He did not take the cash. "Keep it," he said. "You are unemployed as of this afternoon. How—" "Stan called me," he said, interrupting her. "He said your work locker was broken into. He fired you. He said you were attracting trouble to his establishment." Lena's stomach hollowed out. Fired. She had lost her job. She had lost her apartment in the span of 12 hours. Her entire life had been detonated. She pulled her hand back, the money clutched tightly. The fight had drained out of her, leaving a cold, terrifying emptiness. "Where is your car?" she whispered. "Down the street." She shouldered her backpack. She did not look back at the room as she pulled the door shut, the lock clicking with a hollow finality. The car was a black sedan, so dark it seemed to absorb the light from the street lamps. It was silent, expensive, and anonymous. He opened the back door for her, and she slid onto the leather seat. He got in beside her, and the car pulled away from the curb so smoothly she barely felt the motion. They drove through the city, leaving her gritty neighborhood of sirens and desperation behind. They climbed the hills, the buildings growing taller, the air seeming to clean itself with every block. They entered an underground garage, passed through 2 security gates, and parked in a private elevator bay. The elevator ride was silent. Lena watched the numbers climb, her ears popping. They were going up, far higher than she had ever been. The doors opened, not into a hallway, as she expected, into the apartment itself. Lena stopped breathing. The entire wall in front of them was glass, a floor-to-ceiling, 50-foot wide expanse of it. The city glittered below them, a sea of diamonds and rubies. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly alien. The penthouse was vast, a landscape of white marble, dark wood, and chrome. It was impeccably clean, minimalist, and cold. There was no clutter, no mail on the counter, no shoes by the door, no photographs. It was not a home. It was a fortress, a showroom. The silence was the most jarring part. It was a heavy, pressurized quiet. Down on the street, life was a constant hum of traffic, voices, and music. Up here, there was nothing. Just the faint, mechanical breath of the ventilation system. This is your home, Lena asked, her voice sounding small in the enormous space. He had walked past her, shrugging off his coat and tossing it onto a chair. It was the first casual movement she had ever seen him make. "It is where I sleep," he said. "Your room is this way." He led her down a long hall, the marble cool beneath her sneakers. He opened the door. The guest room was 3 times the size of her studio apartment. It had its own glass wall, its own sprawling, king-sized bed, and an attached bathroom that looked like it belonged in a magazine. "You will be safe here," he said from the doorway. "There are guards in the lobby and on this floor. No one enters without my authorization." He was about to leave when she spoke. "Why me?" Damiano turned. The light from the hallway framed him, leaving his face in shadow. "Why go to all this trouble? I am a waitress." "You said it yourself. No one would care if I disappeared." He was silent for a long moment. "Because I was there," he finally said. "I saw it, and I do not permit chaos in my territory." He closed the door, leaving her alone in the sterile, luxurious silence. Later, food appeared. A quiet man in a crisp white shirt wheeled in a cart, set up plates of grilled fish and asparagus on the massive dining table, and disappeared without a word. Lena sat opposite Damiano, the 10 feet of polished wood between them feeling like a canyon. She picked at the food. It was delicious, but she could barely swallow. He broke the silence. "You were studying biology," he stated, not asked. Lena looked up, surprised. "My textbook." He nodded. "You want to be a nurse?" "Yes." "Why?" The question was simple, direct. She found herself answering honestly, her voice low. "I grew up in the foster system." Damiano stopped eating. He placed his fork down and gave her his full, unnerving attention. She had never told anyone this, not the men she had dated briefly, not her co-workers, but here, in this sterile tower, it felt as if nothing she said could touch her. It was cold, she said, trying to find the words. "You move around so much. You learn not to get attached to anything. People, places, they are all temporary." She looked down at her plate. "Kids were always getting hurt or sick, and the system is just cracks. It is all cracks. There is no one to catch you when you fall." She looked back up at him. "I want to be the person who catches people. I want to fix things." She had been working since she was 16, saving every dollar. The community college program was the first step. It was the only thing she had ever wanted for herself. "And what about you, Damiano?" she asked, emboldened by her own confession. "What do you do? Manage your family's interests?" He leaned back in his chair, regarding her. His eyes were hooded, the unreadable mask back in place. "My father built an empire. He said, my job is to protect it. From the Rocchettis?" He nodded, "among others. So you are like them? You are in the Mafia?" He supplied the word, his voice smooth. "It is an old-fashioned term. We are businessmen. We deal in commodities that are complicated. Transportation, logistics, security, Lena repeated, a bitter taste in her mouth, like the kind that trashed my apartment." His jaw tightened. "Power always costs something. Lena, the only thing more expensive than having it is not having it. You saw what not having it looks like tonight. A sharp sound, like a whip crack, split the air. It was followed an instant later by the explosive shatter of glass. The window to the left of the dining table, 10 feet away, erupted inward. A small, perfect hole appeared in the center of a new, spider-webbing universe of cracks just before the entire pane imploded. Lena screamed. Damiano moved before the glass had even finished hitting the marble floor. He was not a civilian. He did not duck or hide. He reacted like a predator, a force of nature. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his hand grabbing the back of her chair. He yanked it backward, flipping it, using his own body as a shield. He tackled her, pulling her from the tumbling chair and down onto the floor, his body covering hers completely. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. She was pinned, her face pressed against the cold marble, his entire weight on top of her. He was impossibly heavy, solid muscle and bone. A second shot rang out, a dull thwack as a bullet buried itself in the wall where she had been sitting. "Don't move," he breathed into her ear, his voice a low, commanding growl. She was rigid with terror, unable to move even if she wanted to. His left arm was hooked over her head, protecting it, his face buried in her hair. His other hand was splayed on her back, holding her down. She could feel the rapid, steady beat of his heart against her shoulder, a stark contrast to her own, which was fluttering like a trapped bird. She breathed in a sharp, ragged gasp and was filled with his scent, sandalwood, that expensive tobacco, and something new, the sharp, metallic tang of adrenaline. Her own breath was coming fast, hot against his neck. For 10 agonizing seconds, the world was reduced to the sound of her own ragged breathing and the immense, unyielding weight of the man on top of her. Then silence. He lifted his head, listening. He did not move for another full minute. Finally, he rolled off her, rising to his feet in one fluid motion. He pulled her up by the arm, his grip bruising. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his eyes scanning her. She shook her head, unable to speak. He pulled her toward the inner hallway, away from the wall of broken windows. Men in dark suits were already pouring out of the elevator, fanning out, their voices low and urgent. He pushed her into the guest room. "Stay here. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me." He was gone before she could say a word. She locked the door. Her body began to shake, a violent, uncontrollable tremor. She stumbled to the bed, the massive, empty bed, and collapsed onto it. And then the dam broke. The adrenaline fled, leaving behind a cold, desolate fear. She was in a palace, but it was a war zone. She'd lost her job. She'd lost her home. She'd almost lost her life. She buried her face in a pillow that smelled like lavender and bleach and cried. She cried for her lost, simple, exhausting life. She cried for the biology textbook in her bag. She cried because she knew, with absolute certainty, that she could never, ever go back. He stood outside the door for a long time. He heard the muffled sobs, the sound of a woman breaking. His men had cleared the building. The shots had come from a rooftop across the river, a warning, a message. "We know where you are. We know who you are with." He clenched his fists. This girl, this complication, was a liability. He should have left her in the hallway. He should have given her money and let her disappear. But he had seen her stand up to the drunk. He had seen the stubborn pride in her eyes, and the thought of the Rocchettis getting their hands on her. It lit a cold fire in his gut. He watched her shadow through the crack of light under the door, a crumpled shape on the massive bed. He should leave her alone. He did not know how to do this. He did not know how to comfort. He only knew how to control, to command, to protect. But the sound of her weeping was a weakness in his armor. He waited another hour, until the apartment was silent again, until his men were gone and the window was boarded over. He knocked softly. There was no answer. He opened the door a crack. "Lena?" She was curled on her side, her back to him, but he knew she was not asleep. He entered, closing the door quietly behind him. He sat on the edge of the bed, a good 2 feet of space between them. The mattress barely dipped under his weight. She did not move. He reached out, his hand hovering over her shoulder. He was a man of action, of violence and calculation. This was foreign territory. He finally, gently, brushed the damp hair away from her face. His fingers were rough, calloused, but his touch was surprisingly light. She flinched, her eyes opening. They were red-rimmed and exhausted. She looked at him, and for the first time, she did not look afraid. She just looked empty. She was so tired of fighting, so tired of being scared. She leaned into his touch, just a fraction of an inch. Closing her eyes, it was the first human warmth she had felt all day. It was dangerous, she knew, but she was too exhausted to care. He saw the movement, the slight surrender. He saw the tracks of her tears, the faint parting of her lips. He leaned in, slowly, his eyes fixed on her mouth. He was drawn to her, to this one real, breakable thing in his fortress of steel and glass. He was inches away when she turned her head. His lips brushed her cheek, soft and warm. The rejection was quiet but absolute. He froze, pulling back, his expression hardening, a flicker of embarrassment in his dark eyes. "I cannot," she whispered, sitting up. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. He misunderstood. "I will not touch you again." "No," she said, her voice stronger now. She looked at him, the fear in her eyes being replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "You do not understand. That bullet, it was for me, to get to you." He said nothing, watching her. "I thought staying here as your guest would keep me safe. It does not. It just makes me a target. It makes me the rabbit, just like you said." She took a shaky breath, the pieces of her new reality clicking into place. "Your proposal, in the hallway, I thought you were crazy. What would happen?" she asked, her voice low and trembling, her eyes locking with his. "If I said yes?" Damiano looked at her, his head tilted, the vulnerability in her question. "What would happen if I said yes?" hung in the sterile air of the guest room. He saw the calculation in her eyes, the cold clarity that had replaced her tears. She was not asking for love, she was asking for terms. He sat back, breaking the intense proximity of their near kiss. "If you said yes," he said, his voice returning to its normal, controlled cadence, "we would begin." "Begin what? This marriage, this alliance," he corrected. "But not like that. Not yet. The Rocchettis are testing me. They shot at you to see if I would flinch, if I react too strongly. They know they have found my weakness. If I do nothing, they will take you." "So what is left?" Lena asked, pulling the blanket from the bed and wrapping it around her shoulders. "We test them back," Damiano said. "I cannot announce a marriage overnight. It would be a farce. But I can leak a rumor." Lena frowned. "A rumor?" "Tomorrow, the city's biggest gossip columnist will receive a tip. A photograph of me, leaving a restaurant, with a blurred woman at my side. The story will be that Damiano Viscari, the city's most notorious bachelor, has been tamed." Lena scoffed. "Tamed. It is the kind of language they understand," he said, ignoring her tone. "It is a soft claim. It tells my enemies that you are under my observation. It tells my allies to watch and wait. It is a test. We will see how they react." "And what if they react badly?" she whispered. He stood up, walking to the window and looking out at the boarded-up glass. "They will react, Lena. The only question is how, and whether or not you are prepared for it." For 3 days, the penthouse was a silent, gilded prison. Lena stayed in her room, reading her biology textbook, the words blurring on the page. She was living in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the next shot to be fired. On the 4th morning, Damiano knocked and entered, a newspaper in his hand. He tossed it onto the table where she was picking at a bowl of fruit. She looked at the front page of the society section. There it was, a grainy photo of Damiano, and a woman's silhouette with blurred features. Her hair dark like Lena's. The headline was large. "Viscari heirs mystery woman. It is done," he said. Lena felt a wave of nausea. Her face, her identity, was now a city-wide rumor. That afternoon, the reaction came. Damiano was in his study when his phone buzzed. He listened for a moment, his face impassive. He hung up and turned on the large television built into the wall. He flipped to the local news. "Lena," he called out. His voice was flat, but it carried an urgency that made her run from the kitchen. She stopped in the doorway, her eyes fixed on the screen. It was a live feed from a news helicopter, looking down on a street she knew well, a street she used to walk every day. Rosie's diner was engulfed in flames. Thick, black smoke billowed into the sky. The camera zoomed in on the burned-out shell of the building. The familiar sign melted and hanging at a grotesque angle. A reporter's voiceover was grim. Firefighters are struggling to contain the blaze, which is believed to have started in the early hours of the morning. Police are already citing suspected gang activity in the neighborhood, a tragic loss for the community. But officials say this kind of retaliatory violence is on the rise. Lena put a hand over her mouth. Her locker, her last paycheck, her old, simple life, it was gone. It was just ashes. Gang violence, she whispered. Horrified. They did this. Yes, Damiano said. He turned off the television, plunging the room back into silence. This was their answer to your rumor? To burn down a diner? It was not just a diner. Lena, he said, turning to face her. His eyes were cold, like polished stones. It was your last tie. Your place of employment. They are severing your connections, isolating you. They are confirming that you are, indeed, the leverage. He picked up his suit jacket. Pack your bag. What? We are leaving? The penthouse is a target. The test is over and they have failed it. I am taking you somewhere they cannot reach. An hour later, they were in the same black sedan, leaving the city limits. Lena watched the skyline recede until it was just a jagged line of steel against a gray sky. They drove north for nearly 2 hours, into rolling hills covered in dense, old-growth forest. The road became a private, winding lane, and finally, they stopped before a set of 20-foot-high wrought-iron gates. Armed guards, dressed in discreet black uniforms, emerged from a stone guardhouse. They recognized Damiano's car and opened the gates without a word. The car proceeded down a long drive, and Lena saw the house. It was not a house. It was an estate, a sprawling, 3-story villa of old stone and dark ivy. It looked like it had been transported directly from Sicily. It was beautiful, imposing, and surrounded by a high stone wall that seemed to blend into the forest. Welcome to the Vescari compound, Damiano said. My grandfather built this. No one gets in or out unless I say so. The car stopped, and he led her inside. If the penthouse was a modern fortress of glass and steel, this was a bastion of old-world power. The floors were dark, polished wood. The air smelled of lemon oil and old books, and the walls were covered in heavy tapestries and ancestral portraits of men with Damiano's dark eyes and severe jaw. A woman was waiting for them in the grand foyer. She was small and ancient, dressed entirely in black, her silver hair pulled into a tight, severe bun. She looked as permanent as the stone walls around her. Nonna, Damiano said, and the coldness in his voice melted. He bent to kiss the woman's cheek, a gesture of affection so genuine it startled Lena. This is the one, the old woman said. Her voice was a dry rustle, her English thick with an Italian accent. Damiano straightened. Nonna Lucia, this is Lena Moretti. She will be staying with us. Lucia's eyes, as sharp and dark as her grandson's, swept over Lena. It was not a judgment, but an appraisal, a weighing. Lena felt stripped bare, but she refused to look away. She had lost everything. All she had left was her spine. She held the old woman's gaze. Lucia nodded, a single, sharp dip of her chin. So, you are the girl who has stopped the city. She turned to Damiano. She is too thin. Bring her to the kitchen over the next week. Lena's life changed. She lived in a large, comfortable room with a fireplace and a view of the sprawling, manicured gardens, but it was a gilded cage. Guards patrolled the perimeter. Every door had a code. She was safe, but she was a prisoner. Her only companion was Lucia. Damiano was busy, locked in his study for hours, taking meetings with hard-faced men who arrived in black cars and never stayed long. Lucia, however, sought Lena out. She found her in the library and wordlessly handed her a cup of tea. She sat with her in the garden, shelling peas. She spoke little, but when she did, her words carried weight. "You are afraid of him," Lucia said one afternoon, not looking up from her knitting. Lena, who had been staring at a guard near the wall, looked at her. "I'm afraid of this. All of it." Lucia smiled, a faint crinkling at the corners of her eyes. "This is just a life, child. Like any other. It has rules. My grandson. He knows only rules. He does not know. Feeling. Not since his father." Lena seized the opening. What happened to his father? Lucia's knitting needles still, the Rocchettis, she said, her voice turning to ice. They were rivals. But the Rocchettis are animals. They do not follow the old ways. They do not respect family. They murdered him. Not in a meeting, not in the street, in his car, on his way to Mass. She crossed herself. A quick, angry gesture. Damiano was 18. She whispered, he had to take over. He had to become iron, or they would have torn us apart. He has been iron ever since. She finally looked at Lena. And now they see you. They think you are the one thing that is not iron. They think you are his weakness. Am I? Lena asked. Lucia's smile returned, thin and sharp. He brought you here. He brought you to me. That is the answer. A few days later, Damiano found her in the library. There is a party tonight, he said from the doorway. Lena looked up from her textbook. She'd been trying, fruitlessly, to study. I am not in the mood for a party. It is not a request. It is our engagement party. Lena stood up so fast her chair scraped on the floor. Our what? We're not engaged. The rumors are flying. The Rocchettis are quiet since the fire. Too quiet. We are forcing their hand. Tonight. Every important family in the city will be here. They will see you. They will see you as my fiancé. We are making this real. Lena, at least in public. She stared at him, her heart hammering. A performance, just like the diner, but on a much grander scale. A dress has been laid out for you, he said. Be ready at 8. The dress was a weapon. It was made of emerald green silk, a color that brought out the fire in her dark hair. It was simple, elegant, and had a back that plunged almost to her waist. When she put it on, she barely recognized herself. She was no longer Lena the waitress. She was an imposter, a woman playing a dangerous part. She walked down the grand staircase at 8 o'clock. Damiano was waiting at the bottom. He was in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. He looked up as she descended, and for a half second, his control slipped, his eyes darkened, his breath catching almost imperceptibly. He was not looking at a strategy. He was looking at a woman. He held out his hand. She placed hers in it. His grip was warm and firm. You look appropriate, he said, his voice a low murmur. Thank you, she said dryly. You look like a pallbearer. A small smile touched his lips. Ready? No. He pulled her hand through the crook of his arm. It does not matter. Just stay by my side. Smile, and do not believe a word anyone says to you. The ballroom was filled with people, hundreds of them. The men were in tuxedos, the women in designer gowns and dripping with jewels. It was a sea of power, wealth, and quiet menace. For 2 hours, Lena stood beside Damiano, his hand resting possessively on the bare skin of her lower back. The contact was electric, a constant, scorching reminder of his presence. He leaned in close, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered instructions. The man with the silver hair is Judge Harrison. He controls the shipping docks. Smile at him, but do not shake his hand. The woman in red, by the fireplace, that is Bianca Falcone. Her family wants an alliance. She wants me. She will try to provoke you. Sure enough. Bianca, a stunning blonde with cold blue eyes, drifted over. She looked Lena up and down, a dismissive sneer on her perfect face. So, this is the one, Bianca said, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. I must say, Damiano, I am surprised. I heard you found her wiping tables. Lena felt Damiano's fingers tighten on her back, a silent warning to stay calm. Lena turned to Bianca, her expression polite, almost sweet. She remembered Nonna Lucia's words. Be stronger than they are. He did, Lena said, her voice clear and steady. He has a passion for finding value in overlooked places. It is what makes him such a good businessman. And you are? Bianca's face flushed. The men listening chuckled. Damiano's gaze on Lena was one of pure, unadulterated approval. He leaned in again, his breath warm on her neck. Well done, he murmured. By the end of the night. Lena was exhausted. She had smiled at politicians, nodded at men who looked like killers, and deflected the barbed compliments of jealous women. She had held her head high, channeling a strength she did not know she possessed. She had played the part of Lena Vascari, future matriarch, and to her shock, she had won. When the last guest left, she sagged against him. the adrenaline vanishing. "Take me upstairs," she whispered. "I cannot stand for another second, In the private suite, she leaned against the closed door, her feet aching, her head swimming. Damiano stood in the center of the room, watching her. "You were incredible," he said. "I was pretending," she replied. "Exhausted." He stepped closer. Was all of it pretend? He was standing in front of her now, close enough for her to feel the heat from his body. She looked up at him, at the dark eyes that had been her anchor all night. "I do not know," she said honestly. He reached out, his hand going to the back of her dress. "There is a zipper," he said, his voice thick. She turned her back to him, her heart thudding. She felt the cold metal tab, then the shockingly warm brush of his fingers as he slowly, carefully, pulled the zipper down. The silk parted, and she felt the cool air of the room on her bare skin. His fingers grazed her spine as he finished. The dress loosened, and she held it up against her chest. She turned to face him. The performance was over. The tension that had been simmering between them all night, all week, finally snapped. He did not say a word. He cupped her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. His eyes searched hers, and then he kissed her. It was not gentle. It was not a test. It was a release, a desperate, claiming act. His lips were firm, demanding, and tasted of whiskey and control. Lena gasped, and he took the opportunity, deepening the kiss, his tongue sweeping into her mouth. It was an invasion, and she met it. Her hands, which had been clutching the dress, flew up, tangling in his thick, dark hair, pulling him closer. He groaned, a low, animal sound deep in his chest. His hands left her face, sliding down her arms to her waist, pulling her flush against the hard lines of his body. She could feel the solid muscle of his chest, the heavy beat of his heart against hers. He lifted her, her feet leaving the floor, and her legs instinctively wrapped around his waist. He held her, his hands splayed on her bare back, supporting her, pressing her closer. The kiss was no longer a battle, it was a drowning. It was raw and needy, and it was everything she had been repressing for weeks. He moved, walking them toward the bed. This was it. This was the true alliance, the one of blood and heat, not paper. But as he laid her on the sheets, the cool fabric against her back shocked her back to reality. "Stop." She pushed at his chest. He was heavy, his body pinning her, but the words stopped him instantly. He froze, pulling back just enough to look at her. His eyes were dark with passion, his breathing ragged. "Lena?" he rasped. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes, blurring his face. She scrambled away from him, pulling the silk dress up to cover herself. "I cannot," she whispered, her voice breaking. He sat up, his confusion and frustration visible. "I thought... tonight." Lena shook her head, tears spilling onto her cheeks. What was that? Was that part of the performance? Was that for the spies? "What?" "No," Damiano said, running a hand through his disordered hair. That was what?" she demanded, her voice rising. "I played a role tonight. I was Lena Vescari, your fiancé. I smiled at your partners and insulted your rivals. But what happens when the party is over? Who am I then?" She stood up, walking to the far side of the room, clutching the dress to her chest. She looked at him, the man who had saved her, endangered her, and now wanted to consume her. "Not until I know who I am to you." The night of the party ended in a cold, silent truce. Damiano did not touch her again. He had left her in the suite, his final look one of masked frustration and a flicker of something she could not name, perhaps respect. He slept in a different room. For a week. The compound was a quiet, tense purgatory. Lena saw him only at dinner, where he and Nonna Lucia would speak in rapid, low Italian, their words a wall she could not penetrate. He was polite, cold, and distant. He was the Iron Man Nonna had described, and Lena felt the chill of his control. She was his showpiece, his fiancée in name, but in practice, she was his prisoner. Locked in a fortress of stone and trees. The tension broke on a Tuesday morning. Damiano was in his study when a call came. Lena, restless, was pacing the hall outside and heard his voice, sharp and sudden, barking in English. "He's not taking the waterfront. It is not his to take. Tell Sal to hold the line. I am on my way." There was a slam as he hung up. Lena's heart hammered. A territorial dispute. She remembered Nona's words. This was his life. Violence, control, holding the line. She stood in the foyer as he emerged, pulling on the same black, tailored coat he had worn the night they met. He was checking a sleek, dark pistol, the slide clicking back with terrifying, metallic precision. He tucked it into a holster at the small of his back. "Where are you going?" Lena demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. "Business," he said, not looking at her. His men, 2 of them, waited by the door. "I am coming with you." He finally stopped and looked at her. His gaze was flat and dangerous. "No, you are not. I am your fiancé. We had a party. I am supposed to be by your side. How does it look if you keep your future wife locked away like a porcelain doll?" A flash of anger crossed his face. "This is not a performance. Lena, this is not a party. These are men who put a bullet through my window. You will stay here, where I know you are safe." "I am not safe," she cried, the old trapped feeling rising in her throat. "I am a target. I am a prisoner. I am tired of being locked away while my life burns down around me. If I am going to be in this world, I need to see it. I need to know what I am saying yes to." He stalked toward her, stopping just inches away. His proximity was a physical blow. "You have no idea what you are asking," he whispered, his voice a low, furious growl. "You see this. You will not be able to unsee it. You will stay here. I will not." His jaw tightened. He turned to his guards. "Do not let her leave the grounds, under any circumstances." He turned and walked out the door without looking back. Lena watched the black sedan disappear down the long drive. She was shaking, not with fear, but with a white-hot, suffocating rage. Locked. He had locked her inside. He had made her a showpiece and then put her back in her box. She felt like a child in the foster system again, powerless. Her fate decided by indifferent, powerful figures. She would not have it. She spent an hour pacing the library, her mind racing. The guards were loyal to him, unbribable. The walls were high, the gates electronic. But the compound was not just a fortress. It was a functioning household. She remembered the schedules, the heavy thrum of the laundry truck that came every Tuesday and Friday, the deliveries of food, wine, supplies. She went to the kitchens. Lucia was there, overseeing the preparation of bread. Lena grabbed an apron. "Can I help?" Lucia looked at her, her dark eyes knowing. He left. "Yes. And you are a bird in a cage." Lena's hand stilled on the flowery countertop. "I cannot be... Nona, I will break." Lucia studied her, then nodded once. "The laundry truck leaves from the service bay in 10 minutes. It is a blind spot. Rico, the driver, is old and half-deaf. They do not check the bins of outgoing linens. It was all Lena needed. She moved quickly, slipping out the kitchen service door and into the bustling loading area. She found the truck, its back open, large canvas bins waiting to be loaded. She slipped into the largest one, burrowing down beneath sheets that smelled faintly of bleach and Damiano's sandalwood soap. The ride was agonizingly long, bumpy and dark. When the truck finally stopped, she waited until she heard the driver get out, his boots crunching on gravel. She peeked out. She was in an alley, behind a commercial laundry. She scrambled out and ran. She was in the city. The air was thick with exhaust and noise. She had no money, no phone, but she knew where she was. This was the industrial district, near the waterfront. Tell Sal to hold the line. He's not taking the waterfront. She walked fast, her heart a cold knot in her chest. She was in way over her head, fueled by a reckless, desperate need to prove she was not breakable. She found a street, lined with brick warehouses, silent and imposing. It felt wrong, too quiet. She saw his car first, the black sedan parked at the end of the street. She started to run toward it, a cry of relief on her lips. A second car, a dark blue SUV she did not recognize, squealed around the far corner, blocking the street. The world erupted. The sound of gunfire was not like in the movies. It was deafening. a series of rapid, explosive cracks that echoed off the brick, vibrating in her bones. Lena screamed, diving behind a rusted-out dumpster, the air filled with the smell of gunpowder and hot metal. She squeezed her eyes shut, her hands over her ears. Bullets ricocheted, whining through the air. "Get the girl!" a voice yelled. "Not Damiano's." A hand grabbed her by the hair, yanking her out from her hiding place. She screamed, lashing out, but the man was strong. He smelled of sweat and cigarettes. He hauled her to her feet, clamping an arm around her throat and pressing a pistol to her temple. "Vescari," he shouted, dragging her into the open. "Drop it, or she dies." Lena's eyes found him. Damiano was crouched behind his car, his gun in hand, his face. His face was not the cold iron mask of the Mafia boss. It was a canvas of pure, stark terror. He was white, his eyes wide, fixed on the gun at her head. He stood up slowly, dropping his weapon. It clattered to the pavement. "Good." The man holding her chuckled. "Now." Damiano moved. It was not a lunge. It was an explosion. He had dropped his gun, but he had not dropped the pistol on his back. In one fluid, impossible motion, he drew it, fired twice, not at the man holding her, but at another man emerging from the SUV. Then he was on them. He slammed into the man holding her, a brutal, full-body tackle. Lena was thrown to the ground, the air knocked from her lungs. The pistol went off, the shot deafeningly close to her ear. She heard a pained grunt, a thud. She looked up, gasping. Damiano was standing over her, his gun still raised, his chest heaving. The man who had held her was on the ground, clutching his knee. He did not look at the man. He looked at Lena. His face was a mask of such fury she flinched. He grabbed her arm, yanking her to her feet, and shoved her toward his sedan. "Get in the car, now!" He pushed her into the passenger seat, slammed the door, and was in the driver's side a second later. The engine roared to life, the tires smoking as he spun the car in a 180 and sped away, leaving his men and the shootout behind. He drove with a focused, terrifying silence. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He was shaking. When they were 5 miles away, he pulled the car into a dark, underground garage and slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt. He cut the engine. In the sudden, oppressive silence, he turned to her. He did not yell. His voice was a ragged whisper, torn from his throat. "Are you insane?" He slammed his hands against the steering wheel, the impact making her jump. "What were you thinking?" he roared, the control finally breaking. He was vibrating with a rage so profound it terrified her. "Do you have any idea what you did? He could have killed you. He was 2 seconds from pulling that trigger. You just what? Lena, you just wanted to see?" He was not just angry. She could see it now. In the dim light of the garage, his face was pale, his eyes frantic. He was utterly, bone-deep, terrified. He grabbed her, not gently. He hauled her across the center console, pulling her into a brutal, desperate embrace. His arms crushed her against his chest, his face burying in her hair. She could feel him shaking, his whole body racked with tremors. "You could have died," he whispered, his voice cracking. He said it again, not to her, but into her skin. "You could have died." She wrapped her arms around him, holding on as his control disintegrated. He held her, his heart hammering against her ribs for a long, long time, until his breathing slowed and the shaking subsided. This was not a safe house. It was a small, reinforced apartment above the garage. He led her upstairs, his hand locked on her wrist, as if he was afraid she would evaporate. He paced the small living room, the adrenaline dumping, leaving him pale and ragged. He ran a hand through his hair, over and over. "You cannot do that again," he said, his voice raw. "I cannot be your prisoner," she shot back, her own fear turning to anger. He stopped, turning on her. "Prisoner?" He gestured wildly with his hand. "I am protecting you." "From what? From life? You brought me into this. You put your name on me. You cannot just hide me in a castle and expect me to be grateful." She saw it then, a faint, dark stain on the sleeve of his white shirt, just above the cuff. "You are bleeding," she said, her anger vanishing. He looked down, as if just noticing. "It is a graze. "It is nothing. Sit down," Lena ordered, her voice shifting, the nurse in training taking over. Damiano, for the first time, did exactly as she said. He sat on the edge of the leather sofa, his shoulders slumped, the Iron Man gone. Lena found a first aid kit in the bathroom. She knelt in front of him, gently rolling up his sleeve. It was a nasty graze. A bullet had torn the skin along his forearm. It was sluggishly bleeding. She cleaned it, her hands gentle and steady. He watched her, his expression unreadable. His hands, she noticed, were resting on his knees. And they were trembling. Not the violent shakes from the car, but a fine, uncontrollable tremor. His breathing was still too fast, too shallow. He was in shock. She finished bandaging the wound, her touch lingering on his arm. She looked up, her hands moving to cup his face. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing, his breath shuddering. "Damiano," she whispered. He looked at her, and the last of his defenses crumbled. She saw not the Mafia boss, but the 18-year-old boy who had been forced to become iron. "I have never," he whispered, his voice thick, "wanted to protect anyone this much." He shook his head, a look of self-loathing on his face. "When I saw him grab you, I went cold. I did not think so. I just reacted." He took a ragged breath. "In my world, that is a death sentence. To lose control, to have a weakness." "It is terrifying. You are terrified," she whispered, understanding, not of them, of me. He stared at her, his vulnerability a raw, open wound. She leaned in and kissed him. It was not the bruising, desperate kiss from the party. It was a slow, tender claim. It was an answer. It was solace. She kissed him until his trembling stopped, until his lips softened under hers, until his hand came up to tangle in her hair. He kissed her back, and it was drowning. It was the release of a week of tension, a lifetime of control. He pulled her onto his lap, his mouth moving from hers to her jaw, her neck. "Lena," he whispered, his voice a prayer against her skin. This was not a performance. This was not a test. This was a surrender. He stood, lifting her effortlessly, and carried her into the bedroom. He laid her on the bed, his eyes never leaving hers. He was not asking for permission. He was asking for refuge. Slowly, urgently. They came together. It was a collision of fear and safety, of passion and a desperate, profound need to feel alive. Her hands traced the hard muscles of his chest, his back. His hands were everywhere, gentle but possessive, learning the lines of her body. He whispered her name, over and over, as he moved within her, a litany against the violence of the world outside. She arched against him, a silent, final answer, her body claiming his just as he claimed hers. It was not gentle, and it was not rough. It was necessary. It was a fusion, a vow made in skin and heat and whispered breaths, more binding than any ceremony. Later, they lay tangled in the sheets, the sounds of the city a distant hum. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only a raw, bone-deep connection. He was on his back, his bandaged arm resting on the pillow, his other arm wrapped tightly around her waist. She was curled against his side, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. He brushed the damp hair from her forehead, his fingers tracing the line of her cheek. "Marry me," he said, his voice quiet in the darkness. Lena tensed, ready to argue, but he spoke before she could. "Not because you are in danger," he said, his voice heavy, "because I am, without you." She lifted her head to look at him. The man of iron, the man who controlled a city, was laid bare, admitting the one thing he feared most. She did not say yes. She did not need to. She kissed the center of his chest, just above his heart. She settled back down, her arm moving across his stomach, her body locking with his. She did not answer. But she stayed in his bed, miles away. At the compound, a man watched the clock. Marco, Damiano's cousin, a man with a smile that never reached his eyes, walked into the communications room. He waited until the guard on duty stepped out for coffee. He picked up a secure, encrypted phone and dialed a number. "He's not here," Marco said, his voice low. He took the girl. A muffled voice replied on the other end. Yes, Marco said. The city's safe house, the one on Mercer. I do not know why. He is alone with her. It is just the two of them. They returned to the compound under a shroud of silence. The night at the city's safe house had changed everything, weaving a new, fragile, and terrifying intimacy between them. Damiano did not leave her side for 2 days. He moved a desk into the corner of her suite, conducting his business in low, tense tones, his eyes constantly finding hers. He was a lion pacing the boundaries of its enclosure, and she was the one thing he was determined to protect. But Lena was not made for a cage, no matter how gilded. On the 3rd day, the air in the compound felt suffocating. Nonna Lucia needs oregano, she announced, finding Damiano in the hall, the fresh kind, from the market in town. Damiano looked up from his phone, his expression flat. No. Nonna Lucia says the guards can take us. It is 5 miles away. Damiano, it is a farmer's market in our own territory. She said it is safe. He hesitated. He looked at her face, pale from confinement and the dark circles under her eyes. He had made her a prisoner of his protection. 1 hour, he said, his voice clipped. Sal and Marco go with you. You do not leave Nonna's side. You do not speak to anyone. Understood? It was a small, stupid victory, but it felt like breathing. The market was a burst of life, stalls of red tomatoes, bright green herbs, and the smell of fresh bread. Nonna Lucia moved slowly, haggling with a farmer over the price of olives, her black-clad figure a stark contrast to the vibrant colors. Lena stayed close, Sal and Marco, Damiano's cousin, flanking them. It happened in the space of a breath. Nonna pointed to the oregano. Lena turned to grab it. Marco stepped aside to look at a stall of cured meats. In that single, engineered gap of security, a hand clamped over Lena's mouth from behind. Another arm, thick as a steel bar, encircled her waist, lifting her off her feet. She tried to scream, but the sound was smothered. She kicked, but she was already moving, being dragged backward between 2 stalls. She saw Sal shout, his hand going for his gun, but a black van, one she had not even registered, screeched up to the curb. The back doors burst open. She was thrown inside, her head striking the metal floor. A second man jumped in. Before she could orient herself, a coarse burlap sack was pulled over her head, plunging her into hot, suffocating darkness. The doors slammed, the van peeled out, the tires screaming. She was bound, hands, feet. The bag over her head smelled of rust and oil. She was thrown, tossed by the van's reckless driving. When it finally stopped, she was hauled out, half carried, half dragged, into a place that smelled of damp concrete and motor oil, a warehouse. She was thrown onto a cold floor. She heard a heavy door slide shut, the sound echoing in the vast, empty space. A voice, slick and amused, cut through the dark. Well, look at what the Vescari boss holds so dear. The bag was ripped from her head. She blinked in the dim light. A man stood over her, his suit too shiny, his face pocked with old scars. This was not a soldier. This was a boss. This was Gianni Ricchetti. He crouched, his cologne sickening. She's prettier than I expected, he mused. He traced a dirty finger along her jaw. Lena spat in his face. The slap was immediate, a blinding flash of white-hot pain that sent her reeling. Her cheek exploded, the taste of blood flooding her mouth. Fire, he chuckled, wiping his face. I like it. He stood up, pulling a phone from his pocket. Let us make the call. In the compound, Damiano Vescari was staring at the oregano, crushed on the pavement where Lena had fallen. Sal was standing before him, his face bruised, his hand bandaged. A van, black. No plates, he reported, his voice low with shame. Marco. Marco was hit. A graze. They were fast, boss. They knew we were coming. Damiano's face was not angry. It was not sad. It was terrifyingly empty. He was a man hollowed out, leaving only ice and iron. His phone rang. He looked at the unknown number, then at his cousin Marco, who was leaning against a car, a medic tending his arm. He answered it. Gianni, he said. A laugh crackled over the line. Damiano. So good to hear your voice. I have something of yours. She's a lovely girl, a bit of a fighter. Damiano closed his eyes. What do you want? The eastern docks. All of it. And the shipping lanes. You give them to me. You get her back. Minus a few bruises. Of course. You have 1 hour. 1 hour, Damiano repeated. He hung up. He did not call his lawyers. He did not call his accountants. He walked to the armory in the basement of the compound. His men, already assembled, watched him. He was a general preparing for war. We are not giving them the docks, Damiano said, his voice a low growl that echoed off the stone. We are not negotiating. We are not paying. We are ending this. He looked at Sal. Where? The old shipping depot. Warehouse 12. It is their main distribution hub. Damiano nodded, checking the slide on his own pistol. They think they took my weakness. He chambered around. We are going to show them they just signed their own death warrant. He did not storm their compound. He stormed their fortress. Lena was tied to a steel chair in the middle of the warehouse. Her cheek was swelling, a deep, painful purple. Gianni Rocchetti was pacing, checking his watch. Your man is late, he sneered, looking at Lena. He must not want you that badly. Maybe the docks are worth more. The lights went out. The entire warehouse plunged into absolute, disorienting blackness. What the hell, Gianni yelled. Get the generators. A series of muffled thwacks echoed from the perimeter. Not gunfire, silencers. A second later, the chaos began. A flashbang grenade detonated near the entrance. A blinding white light and a deafening sound that made Lena scream. Men yelled. Then the real gunfire started. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Damiano's team, outfitted with night vision, moved through the darkness like ghosts, a disciplined, lethal force against a panicked, blind rabble. Lena squeezed her eyes shut, pulling at the ropes that bit into her wrists. A hand grabbed her. Not Damiano's, Gianni Rocchetti. He pressed a pistol to her head. He is here. He screamed into the darkness. Vascari! One more step and she is dead. The shooting stopped. The silence was heavier, more terrifying than the noise. A single spotlight from a tactical rifle snapped on, illuminating them in the center of the room. Lena was pinned, Gianni using her as a human shield. Let her go. Gianni, Damiano's voice boomed from the darkness. Give me the docks, give me a passage, or I swear to God. Damiano stepped into the light. He was dressed in black tactical gear, his face cold, his pistol held steady, aimed at them. No, Damiano said. The world slowed. He was not looking at Gianni. He was looking at Lena. His eyes locked on hers, a silent, desperate communication. In that fraction of a second, Lena knew what she had to do. She bit down, hard, on the hand that was holding her. She tasted blood and sweat. At the same time, she stomped her heel backward, aiming for his knee, and threw her entire body weight to the side. Gianni roared, his grip loosening for a half second. It was all Damiano needed. A single shot. The sound was deafening. Gianni's body arched, a red flower blooming on his shoulder, his gun clattering to the floor as he collapsed. Silence. Damiano was moving, running. He did not check the body. He did not secure the room. He ran to her. He dropped to his knees, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the knife on his vest, sawing at the ropes on her wrists. Lena was gasping, hyperventilating, the world spinning. I've got you, he whispered, his voice rough. His hands were on her face, his thumbs wiping at the tears she had not realized were falling. He cradled her face, his forehead pressing against hers. I've got you. I've got you. She clung to him, burying her face in his neck, and for the first time in her life, she believed it. The hospital was white and sterile. Lena had a cracked rib from where she had been thrown, a concussion from hitting the van floor, and a constellation of bruises, minor injuries. The doctor had said she felt like she had been hit by a train. Damiano had not left her side. He sat in the hard plastic chair, still in his tactical gear, refusing to let the nurses clean him up. His men were outside, securing the floor. He had ignored a dozen calls from his lieutenants. The Rocchetti family was in chaos, their leader shot, their operation crippled. It was a time for him to seize power, to consolidate. Instead, he sat. He watched her breathe. Lena woke to the steady, quiet beep of the heart monitor. The room was dim. the sun just beginning to stream through the blinds. Her body ached, a deep, throbbing pain. She turned her head. He was there. He had finally fallen asleep, his head slumped forward, his hand still holding hers, his grip locked even in unconsciousness. His hair was a mess, his face dark with stubble, his expensive suit replaced by the rumpled clothes he had worn for 36 hours. He looked, for the first time, like a man. Not a boss, not iron, just a man, exhausted and terrified. She squeezed his hand, his head snapped up, his eyes instantly awake, alert, and filled with a raw, desperate fear. "Lena, you are awake." She tried to smile, but her face ached. "I am not going anywhere." He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since the market. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her bruised knuckles. "We have to talk," he said, his voice hoarse. He sat up, pulling the chair closer. He did not let go of her hand. "They are broken," he said. "The Rocchettis, they are scrambling, but others will come. They will always come." He looked at her, his eyes searching her face. "I am giving you a choice, and this is the last one." Lena waited, her heart beginning to beat faster. "Option 1, he said, his voice flat. "I will give you a new name, a new life, a bank account in Switzerland with enough money to finish nursing school 10 times over. I will send you to London or Paris or anywhere you want to go. You will disappear, you will be safe, and you will never, ever see me again." Lena stared at him. This was the out, the escape she had always dreamed of, a life without fear, without gunfire, without him. Or, he continued, his grip tightening, option 2. He took a shaky breath. "You become my wife. Not a performance, not a rumor, truly. Legally, in the eyes of God and the law, you become Lena Vescari. You will never be safe. You will always be a target, but you will be my target. My name will be your armor and your cage. I will never leave your side. And I will burn the world down before I let anyone touch you again." He leaned forward, his voice a desperate whisper. "You can be free, Lena, or you can be mine." Lena looked at the man in front of her, the man who had shown her violence and passion, terror and safety. She thought of her life in the foster system, of always being temporary, of never belonging to anyone or anything. She thought of the cold, lonely freedom he was offering. She reached up with her free hand, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his unshaven jaw. Tears welled in her eyes, a tearful, painful whisper. "I have been free my whole life, Damiano. It is so lonely." She met his gaze, her decision absolute. "I do not want to be safe. I do not want to be alone. I want to belong somewhere. I want to belong to you." He married her 2 days later, in the private chapel on the compound grounds. It was just them, a priest, old and blind, his hands shaking, and Nonna Lucia, who stood as witness, a single tear tracing a path down her wrinkled cheek. Lena wore a simple, ivory-colored dress Lucia had found for her. Damiano wore a dark suit, his bandaged hand a stark contrast to the black fabric. When the priest asked them to say their vows, Damiano spoke first. "I am not a good man." "Lena," he said, his voice rough, ignoring the priest, "I am a violent man, but I swear I will be your shield. I will be your home. I am yours." Lena was trembling. "I am not a strong woman, but I am not weak. I will not be your weakness. Damiano, I will be your iron. I am yours." They were pronounced man and wife. He kissed her, and it was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of sealing. A brand, that night, in their suite, not hers, not his. He helped her undress. Her body was still a map of fading bruises, her ribs still aching. He was so gentle. She thought she might break. He undressed her, his fingers light, his eyes tracing the purple marks on her skin. He kissed her shoulder. He kissed the bruise on her cheek. "Lena," he whispered, his voice thick. She put her fingers to his lips. No more talking. Their wedding night was not the fire of the city's safe house. That was a desperate collision. This was a slow, deliberate claim. It was a promise. He made love to her slowly, fully, his body worshipping hers. She was trembling, the emotion of the day, the week, the month, overwhelming her. He wiped the tears from her cheeks, kissing them away as he moved within her, his rhythm deep and steady and sure. It was raw. It was emotional. It was transformative. When she cried out his name, it was not as her savior or her captor. It was her husband. She was Lena Vescari. They lay tangled in the sheets, her head on his chest, his heart beating a steady rhythm beneath her ear. For the first time, the compound did not feel like a prison. It felt like a fortress. But as the sun began to rise, Lena heard it, the distant sound of cars, coming up the long drive. Damiano tensed, his arm tightening around her. Danger was still lingering outside their sanctuary. The war was over. The battles were just beginning. The sound of cars in the pre-dawn light was not an attack. It was the arrival of Damiano's lieutenants. Their wedding night was over, and the war had begun. For the first month of their marriage, Lena did not see a gun. The war was fought in silence, in the coded language of numbers, the Rockettis. Decapitated but not destroyed, retaliated by attacking Damiano's legitimacy. They froze his overseas accounts through political allies. They squeezed his shipping lanes. They started a fire in a warehouse in the garment district, costing him millions in lost goods. Lena watched Damiano change. He was not the man who had trembled in her arms. He was the Iron Man again, locked in his study, the phone a permanent attachment to his ear. He was a general fighting a war of attrition, and it was costing him. She would find him at 3 a.m, not in their bed, but staring at the stock tickers, his face illuminated in the blue. Flickering light, a deep line of exhaustion carved between his brows. She came to him one night, placing a cup of coffee on the desk. He did not look up. "They are saying one of your allies in the city council just flipped," he said, his voice flat. "He's launching an investigation into our waterfront holdings. They are bleeding me. Lena," she looked at the screen, at the red arrows all pointing down. "Then let me help," she said. He finally looked up, his eyes weary. You are here. You are safe. That is enough." "No, it is not," Lena said, her voice quiet but unyielding. She turned off the monitor. Damiano stared at the now dark screen, then at her, his expression dangerous. "I am not your weakness, Damiano, but you are letting me be." "What are you talking about? You are fighting on 2 fronts," she said, placing her hands on the desk and leaning in. "You are fighting them, and you are fighting to keep me a prisoner. You are so busy protecting Lena the waitress that you're wasting energy. That woman is gone. I am Lena Vescari. I am your wife, but I am useless, Lena." "So, I am making a demand," she said, cutting him off. "Not a request. You are the Vescari. Your name is my armor, fine, but I am still just a civilian in a steel box. It is not enough." She took a breath, her heart hammering. "I want you to train me." He stood up, his chair scraping on the floor. "Absolutely not. I want to know how to shoot," she continued, her voice rising, matching his sudden anger. "I want to know how to defend myself. I want to know how to survive in this life. I am tired of being the one thing you have to hide. I want to be the one person you do not have to worry about." "Never," he said. "I will not turn my wife into a soldier. I will not put a gun in your hand. You already did," she cried. "The moment you married me. You put me on the front lines. You just forgot to give me a weapon." He stared at her, the silence in the room thundering. She was right, he had made her a target, but kept her a victim. He was protecting a ghost, the ghost of the girl from the diner, while the woman in front of him, his wife, was demanding to be his partner. His hesitation was her victory. "Very well," he said, his voice clipped. "Sal will be here at 6 tomorrow morning. If you are going to do this, you will do it until you are perfect. You will not be a liability." The training was brutal. Sal, the guard who had lost her at the market, treated her with a grim, respectful distance. He started her on hand-to-hand combat, and for the first week, her body was a symphony of new, agonizing bruises. "You are anticipating," Sal said, his voice a low growl as he easily swept her legs out from under her. She landed hard on the mat. "You are flinching. You are thinking like prey." She got up, again. She learned to take a punch. She learned how to use a man's weight against him. She learned to stop flinching. Then came the guns. The first time she held the pistol, a sleek black automatic. Its weight was shocking. It was cold. It was a piece of his world, heavy and real. Damiano watched from the doorway of the training range, his arms crossed, his face a mask. Her first shots were wild. The sound, even with ear protection, made her jump. The recoil was a violent kick against her hand. "No," Damiano said, his voice cutting through her frustration. He stepped onto the range, taking the weapon from her. He stood behind her. His body was a wall of heat. "You are afraid of it," he murmured, his breath stirring her hair. "You are not controlling it. It is controlling you." He put the gun back in her hand, his own hand covering hers. He adjusted her stance, his other hand settling on her waist, turning her hips. It was the most intimate they had been in weeks, but it was not about passion. It was about form. "Breathe out," he said. "Squeeze. Do not pull." She focused, the scent of him, sandalwood and gunpowder filling her lungs. She squeezed. The shot was still loud, but it hit the paper again, he commanded. She grew stronger. Her body, once lean from exhaustion, became hard with purpose. The mental strength came, too. She was no longer a guest in the compound. She was its matriarch. She learned the codes. She learned the guards' names. She learned the supply routes. And she learned to watch. She had been watching Marco, Damiano's cousin, the man who had been grazed at the market. The man who was always smiling, always offering her a kind word, a sympathetic look, as if they were both prisoners of Damiano's world. He was too smooth. She began to notice things. He was the one who managed the family's offshore accounts. He was the one who had been in charge of the waterfront territories that were now under investigation. He was the one who had suggested the market trip. She found him in the communications room one night. She was not supposed to be there, but she had learned the master codes. "Marco," she said, her voice light. She walked in, holding 2 glasses of wine. "I was looking for you. Damiano he is in one of his moods." Marco, who had been sitting at a terminal, quickly shut it down. His smile was strained. "Lena, you should not be here." She pouted, playing the part of the bored, pretty wife. "I know. It is just, I am so lonely." She set the wine glass on his desk, but her eyes were not on him. They were on the desk. Next to the keyboard was a small, silver USB drive. An identical one was attached to his keychain. He was swapping them. She saw a flicker of data on the still warm screen. Coded transfer, outgoing. Her blood went cold. "Thank you." "Lena," he said, taking the wine, his charm back in place. "But I am busy, and you know how Damiano is about this room." "Of course," she said, smiling brightly. She turned and left. Her steps measured. She found Damiano in the garden. She did not speak. She just handed him a small, digital audio recorder. She had been carrying it for a week. She pressed play. The recording was from her pocket, the sound of her voice, Marco's, the click of the keyboard. "What is this?" Damiano asked. "It is the sound of your cousin in the comms room at 2 a.m, accessing your secure servers," Lena said, her voice flat. "He is the one who suggested the market. He was grazed, but Sal was beaten. He is the leak." Damiano's face went white. He had suspected a leak. He had never suspected his own blood. "It is not enough," he said, his voice a low growl. "It is circumstantial." "I know," Lena said. "He thinks I am a fool. He thinks I am just like him, a victim of yours. He thinks he can turn me." Damiano's eyes darkened. "So let him try," Lena finished. "The plan was simple. It was dangerous. It was hers." The next day, she found Marco by the pool. She was trembling, or pretending to be. "I cannot do this anymore." "Marco," she whispered, sitting beside him. "He is a monster. He's losing everything. The council is going to indict him. We are going to be penniless." Marco put a comforting hand on her arm. "Lena, I am scared," she said, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I have to get out. I have my old passport from before. I need money. I need to get to the airport." Marco's eyes lit up. A predatory glint he quickly masked with sympathy. He told her he would help. He told her he had a contact, someone from the Rocchetti family who wanted peace, who could get her out, who would pay for her information. He wanted to know about Damiano's panic room, his final contingency. She told him. She gave him the codes, false codes. She gave him time, tomorrow at noon, when Damiano would be in the city for a meeting. The contact, Marco said, would meet her at the old church by the crossroads. 5 miles from the compound, they would finalize the deal. At 11:30 the next day. Lena got into a small car. "Are you sure about this?" Damiano asked. He was in the passenger seat, dressed in the dark, tactical gear that had become his second skin. "She is my blood, Damiano. She is my wife," he had said to his men. "We are not sacrificing her." "I am sure," Lena said. She drove. When she got to the church, she got out. Marco was there, smiling. He brought a friend. Lena said, her voice low. She was wearing a wire. The man with Marco was not a friend. It was Gianni Rocchetti's brother, Paolo, a man known for his temper, not his intellect. "You did good, Lena," Marco said, stepping forward. "Now, the codes." Before she could speak, Paolo raised a gun, but not at Lena. At Marco. "We do not need you anymore." "Cousin," Paolo sneered. "A small price to pay for the whole Viascari empire. A single shot." Marco looked down, a look of profound shock on his face, a red stain spreading on his shirt. He collapsed. Paolo turned the gun on Lena. "And now, the wife." He never finished the sentence. The sound of Damiano's rifle was a single, sharp crack from the bell tower. Paolo fell. It was over. The traitor was dead. The last Rocchetti was dead. But as Damiano ran from the church, his face a mask of relief, his phone buzzed. It was Sal, from the compound. "Boss," he yelled, his voice frantic over the line. "It was a diversion. The church was a trap. They are here. They are at the gates." The Rocchetti soldiers, the ones Paolo had sent, were not waiting. They were making one final, desperate assault. It was a race. Damiano drove at 100 miles an hour, the car screaming down the private lane. They could see the smoke before they saw the house. The attack was brutal. The front gates were gone. The grounds were a battlefield. Damiano's men were good, but they were outnumbered. Damiano did not park. He drove the car through the side of the house, smashing through the French doors of the dining room. They tumbled out, glass raining down. Lena grabbed the pistol from the glove compartment. Damiano had his. The house was a war zone. The grand foyer was filled with gunfire. "Go to the panic room," Damiano yelled, pulling her. "No!" she screamed back, the sound barely audible over the roar. "We are not hiding. We are finishing this." He looked at her. Her hair was wild. Her eyes were clear. And for the first time, he saw no fear in them. He saw iron. He smiled. He tossed her a fresh magazine. Side by side, they moved as one. It was a force. A brutal, efficient storm. She was his echo, his shadow. She was not a soldier, but she was a survivor. She did not miss. They cleared the ground floor, then the hall. They were back to back, a perfect, lethal partnership. A man, one of the last, got the drop on Damiano from the staircase above. He raised his rifle. Damiano was busy with 2 others. Lena saw him. She did not think. She did not anticipate. She breathed out, just as Damiano had taught her. Squeeze. The man fell. Damiano looked at her, his eyes wide. Silence. The battle was over. The house was in ruins. The old tapestries were smoking. The marble floor was slick. The air thick with the smell of war. They stood in the center of the battlefield, breathing hard, their bodies covered in soot and plaster. It was over. They had won. Damiano walked over to her. He gently took the pistol from her hand. It was still hot. He looked around his ruined home, at the end of his family's war. He looked at his wife. A smear of blood was drying on her cheek, a small cut from flying shrapnel. Her wedding ring, a simple, absurdly large diamond, was shining through the grime. "Still want this life?" he asked, his voice raw. Lena looked up at him, the man who had pulled her from the diner, the man who had terrified her, the man who had given her a name and a home. She smiled, a slow, tired, radiant smile. "Not life," she said, her voice hoarse. "Just you." He pulled her to him, his kiss fierce, tasting of smoke and victory and forever. He grabbed her hand and they walked out of the ruined hall, hand in hand, stronger, united by love and war. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We truly hope you enjoyed the journey of Lena and Damiano. If you did, we would love to hear from you. Please, drop a comment below and let us know where in the world you are listening from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. This story was made just for you by Mafia Romance Stories. If you have not already, please consider subscribing to the channel so you never miss a new episode. And finally, let us know your thoughts on the story in English in the comments. Your feedback is what helps us bring these worlds to life. We will see you next time.